Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Today, an alien ambassador to Earth must explain how you survive on the Australia of the galaxy, Earth. This is a new story from our new writer on the team. I hope you guys really enjoy it. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. And also, check and make sure you're subscribed today, because if you're not, do it. It is totally free. But now, let's get into the story. Ambassador Goki had never expected to spend an entire revolution on Terra, the newly discovered planet, let alone be tasked with preparing the next two Federation ambassadors for their stay. He longed to be done with this place, to banish it from his thoughts forever. Fate, it seemed, had other plans. As the two ambassadors joined Goki on the viewing deck, he noticed the Omigian, Decare, staring at his beak and talons with a mixture of defiance and contempt. It was typical for an Omigian to harbor their long-standing rivalry towards the avian faction associated with Goki's species. Kile, a sleek reptilian who represented the Arcor, kept her focus on the viewport, observing the arid landscape of the human world below, and the flying machines guiding their ship. The realization that he had to teach this unusual pair what he had learned the hard way filled Goki with a sense of injustice. Why hadn't anyone been there to guide him when he first arrived? Life was never as fair as it seemed. "Attention, please," Goki called out. Decare continued to stare, while Kile turned her attention to him. "I know the Council is painting this planet as a paradise," Goki began. "But trust me, it is anything but. If you're lucky enough to survive the venomous creatures, the huge predators, and even the annoying mosquitoes, you'll soon learn that this is a biological hell. As for the sapient inhabitants, they may seem friendly, but they're oblivious to the dangers around them. Ask your questions now, because in 2 rotations, you'll be on your own."
"Pfft," Decare scoffed. "Our scientists say we can live here. The avians will hate the high gravity, but that's good for the rest of us."
Goki sighed inwardly. It seemed his inglorious task would be more challenging than he had anticipated. "What about you, Kile? Are the Arcor buying the Council's narrative?" Goki asked the reptilian, fearing his words of advice would again fall on deaf ears.
"We are free thinkers, Ambassador."
Her voice filled with serenity.
"The humans have proven that the place they call the African Savannah has a similar climate to our homeworld. If you want me to believe Terra is a biological hell, I'm afraid your opinion alone is insufficient."
The tentacles hanging beside Decare's mouth shortened, in a display Goki recognized as mockery. Such ingratitude. This rude gesture nearly caused him to storm out of the viewing deck and report back to the Council, saying that new ambassadors had learned everything they needed to know, and he was ready to leave. But was their ingratitude worth tainting his impeccable work just because he felt his advice was not being appreciated? No. "Well, very well then," Goki said. "I will order the captain to take us to the African Savannah, so that you can see for yourself, and decide if Terra is a suitable planet for your species to live on." Kile lowered a long muzzle in acknowledgement, allowing Goki to contact the bridge and arrange a change of course with the human leadership. With the bureaucracy out of the way and the ship moving fast towards the African Savannah, what followed their initial argument was an uncomfortable trip. Decare crossed his many tentacles in front of his belly in a corner, as if this whole endeavor was a waste of his time, while Goki stayed beside the viewing port on the ground, trying to pretend the feeling was not mutual. When they were getting close to the savannah, Goki requested that the captain use the ship's sensors to find a pride of lions. "Come here, Decare." Goki broke the silence when the captain informed him he had found the pride. "I reckon this shall be enough for both of you to take my words seriously." Decare moved deliberately slowed to show his lack of interest, stopping beside Kile, who was already watching the drama of life and death unfold below. "See those beasts lurking on the golden grass?" Goki pointed his talons. "Pay attention." Through the bowl-shaped viewing port on the ground, Goki followed the pride's elegant approach as they set their sights on a lone zebra grazing near the edge of a thicket. The zebra was unaware of the danger lurking just beyond its line of sight. The lions, heads lowered, body fluid, communicated with subtle glances and shifts in posture. Like a hive mind, each member knowing their role in the dance of the hunt. The eyes of the ambassadors widened when the lead lioness initiated the chase with a burst of speed. Even Decair was captivated by the powerful outburst. The distance between predator and prey closed in a flash, but the zebra sensed the shift in the air and bolted, its hooves kicking up dust clouds as it sought to escape. Goki peeked at Killet, only to find the reptilian tiptoeing as she bent forward, her tense body hinting at the end of her serene demeanor. On the ground, the pursuit went on relentlessly. The zebra weaved through the grasses, its stripes blurring with each desperate turn. The lions kept on pressing on, flanking their target as their muscles burned with exertion. The lead lioness pounced, and there was a moment of intense struggle where dust rose. Then only stillness descended. Decair and Calais exchanged a look, but nothing was said.
"Do you understand now?" Goki said. "If you treat this place as if it is your planet just because of the familiar climate, this is the fate that awaits you."
Just because you cherry-picked a predator in a place where few humans live doesn't mean the planet is the biological hell you claim. I will stay in another biome, and Calais will need a fence if she chooses to stay away from the cities. That's all.
Goki was speechless at Decair stupidly giving time for Calais to speak.
"I won't leave the safety of the city. The humans never mentioned you could be eaten alive here. My species needs to hear word of this."
Seeing at least one of the two ambassadors was not a lost cause gave Goki the motivation to continue his lecture.
"Safety. I was in a city when I almost died for the first time. I was trying my wings against the local gravity when they tired, and I landed on a tree."
Goki paused his speech, reliving the traumatic moment and adding emotion to his voice.
"My talons had barely touched the wood when one of the dead branches came to life and pounced at me with 2 fangs. I was lucky it only reached my feathers, because later I discovered that those fangs were hollow, full of poison. Can you believe this planet? A natural evolving needle."
His overly enthusiastic speech at the end didn't fail to capture the attention of the trainee ambassadors, but instead of the desired effect, Goki realized he came off as crazy by the reactions he got.
The dead branch came to life and attacked you. What are you gonna say next? Living rocks? Perhaps a river that flows uphill? Decair glanced at Calais. Gravity might have caused him to topple over and land on his head.
"We shouldn't dismiss Goki after what he's shown us,"
Calais said.
"The sensible path forward is to investigate the planet and avoid the trees. If there is such a species that attacks you from the branches, we must prepare countermeasures." "You know nothing."
Goki was afraid to come off as crazy again, but it was hard to speak in a perfectly composed voice.
"You can avoid the trees, but the snakes slither on the ground, on the branches, in every possible crevice. Even if you spot them early, there are some species that spit venom over long distances, and believe it or not, they will aim for your eyes."
Only silence followed this declaration, both trainee ambassadors exchanging a long gaze. Decair was the first to break the silence.
"What is this, a tactic to scare us? Looks to me that you want us to stay indoors so that our work here will look inferior to yours when our term ends."
"I will not say I fully believe you, Goki. The humans have been living here forever, and they are still around, with a large population nonetheless,"
Calais said.
"But your words warrant at least the benefit of the doubt. I will stay indoors until I can either confirm or deny your claims with the help of the humans." "You are naive. The humans don't help, or rather they think they help, but they only make things worse. What they do is to minimize the risks and let you feel brave like a fool."
Goki was feeling the pair wouldn't last a week on the ground.
"Besides, you are wrong to assume you are safe to stay indoors. There are venomous insects everywhere, and they are not afraid to crawl through the gaps between doors and windows. On Terra, a moment of distraction means death."
"Preposterous," Decair scoffed. "The world you're describing cannot be real, or else you wouldn't have survived an entire revolution on the ground."
"I barely survived,"
There were moments Goki would rather forget.
A small insect the humans call a bee stung my tongue in my first month here, and it nearly killed me. But looking back, this is what saved me. After I was stung, I never opened the windows again, and only the incident that kept that happening was finding 8-legged insects in my bathroom. The humans removed them, but they would always say that if I was to live in fear like that, it would be better not to leave the ship. Yeah, they are right. Not leaving the ship is better.
The tentacles hanging beside Decair's mouth shortened again. I always knew the avians were cowards. But to have one of you admitting that, Terra might be a paradise indeed.
Goki took a deep breath, nearly snapping. He was trying to help by sharing his experience, and look what he got in return, being called a coward along with his species. The kind of thought that went through his head at that moment involved grabbing Decair's tentacles with his talons and ripping them off with his beak. The Omgians could regenerate them later, so losing a few might not be such a problem. Killay's hands touched her muzzle as if smelling the tension rising. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Seeing the apprehension in her eyes helped Goki rein in his emotions. Still, this was insufficient to prevent him from stooping to Decair's level.
You think you can do better than me? The wet biomes your species love are no different from the rest of the planet. A biological hell. I bet my eye you are all talk and you won't last a week on the ground. If you are as stupid as it seems, you won't even get a chance to quit.
Whether he was pretending or not, Decair seemed confident.
My species rules over life forms from swamps, lakes, and wetlands. This is true on our homeworld and every other world that the Federation allows us. Terra will be no different.
Very well then, Goki said. We can go to the Amazon rainforest right now and you can test your skills against the little anacondas, alligators, and piranhas.
Goki was using rhetoric to prove his point, but to his surprise, Decair accepted the challenge.
Good. The ship smells like feathers and my skin could use fresh water.
Calais' eyes widened.
This is unwise, Ambassador. We are going to the Amazon River.
Goki was tired of arguing with Decair. If he desired a closer view of the surface, Goki would allow it. When was a better moment to let his Omegan learn the hard way than now that he was here to watch? Goki contacted the bridge and let them deal with the bureaucracy for yet another change of course. What followed was another short trip, with Goki and Decair each standing on an opposite side wall of the viewing deck, as Calais kept commenting on what she saw on the ground in a futile attempt to lighten up the mood. When the captain informed Goki that it had arrived, he made another request. This time, he wanted to find a place full of alligators so that Decair would see their teeth. Hopefully, watching their violence as the mosquitoes consumed him alive would be enough for Decair to understand Terra was not like any other planet of the Federation. Their ship was quick to scan the surface for a positive match, and not long after, the captain announced that the ramp at the back of the ship was ready to be used, having contacted the dry portion of the shore of an oxbow lake. As if he had something to prove, Decair took the lead, leaving the viewing deck behind to descend the ramp, marching to the surface. Although Calais didn't share his enthusiasm, she still followed him out of the ship. Unlike the others, Goki intentionally lagged behind. His eyes scanned the grainy shore as his brain weighed the risk of stepping beyond the ramp. The possibility of going any further than a single step into the shore hadn't even crossed his mind. The shores were littered with bones and debris from creatures that got too close to the water. Decair and Calais reached the ground fast, but only the former was stupid enough to approach the murky green water, where shadows of massive alligators glided silently, only their eyes and nostrils breaking the surface.
Don't enter the water, Ambassador.
The female reptilian warned him even faster than Goki.
Look at those eyes and snouts poking above the surface. I don't need to see them hunting to know what will happen when you disturb the water.
You underestimate my intellect, Calais. Decair's tone was calm. Those kinds of instinct-driven beasts exist on all worlds. Those seem to be the kind that cannot be tamed nor confronted on water, but they can be easily avoided on land. I mean, look how clumsy their walk is.
Still standing on the ramp, Goki was flabbergasted by how Decair kept advancing along the shore. If not for the cloud of mosquitoes flying around the Omegan, who was trying to hide his discomfort. He might have believed Decaire was enjoying his trip in this hellish environment. Suddenly, Decaire halted his pace close to what looked like a puddle of water that connected to the lake. Unlike the deep waters where the alligators floated lazily, this puddle seemed to contain something different.
"Look at that! There's a fish here," Decaire said. "Those flattened head ones are always friendly."
Decaire was reaching the water with one of his lateral tentacles when Goki's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of something he didn't recognize on the puddle. But why should he worry? He knew the Omigen could just regrow their tentacles effortlessly. So a lost limb would be just a cheap lesson for such a fool. What happened, however, was much more than Goki could have foreseen. When he touched the creature, Decaire's tentacle was not torn out, nor was he forced to remove it because of poison. Instead, his whole body contorted violently, causing him to fall as the remaining tentacles contracted all at once, his face contorting into awkward, rigid angles. If the alligators were to move now, their meal would be assured.
What is happening?
Calais was equally puzzled. That... Long moments passed before Goki's brain dared to come up with a hypothesis. Looks like he's being electrocuted. The unusual situation ensured that Goki's reaction was slow, but after he took his own hypothesis seriously, he ignored his fear and rushed to Decaire's rescue, not daring to touch the contorting Omigen. Goki began grabbing rocks and sticks he found around and throwing them at the snake-like creature that he could barely see through the mud. It took many attempts to scare away the animal. Only after being hit in the head by a stone, it disappeared into the waters. As Goki recovered his breath, Calais approached and took Decaire's tentacle from the water. She said,
He's alive.
Goki ignored the information.
Electricity. In a fish.
Goki saw the realization strike Calais as her eyes widened. He knew exactly what she was feeling. An exchange of looks was enough for him to notice that no more convincing would be needed for her to believe that the planet was a biological hell. Time passed fast after that. The crew rescued Decaire, and when he woke up, Calais had already quit her job as ambassador. Decaire didn't apologize, nor did he change his opinion about the avians, but he also quit moments after understanding why he had lost consciousness. Goki's report to the council was detailed, but he still struggled to explain how the two ambassadors had quit after only hours had passed after their arrival. His solution was to blame the humans for their lack of understanding of how horrible their planet was. But he didn't forget to mention that they were the friendliest sapiens he'd ever found. When the long-awaited day of his departure came, Goki was certain that the council would let him take the fall, and he would never work for the Federation again. But several days later, when he was already enjoying the safety of his planet, the most surprising piece of news found its way into his nest. Terra had been demoted from a paradise world to the newly created status of a biological death world, a planet with good climate and gravity, but filled with deadly life forms throughout its surface. And that was not all. Goki had been appointed as the first director of the Containment Department, a subsection of the Federation that would be solely responsible for ensuring that a single non-sapient species ever leaves the space of Terra's atmosphere on accident